I'm John Clippinger. Thank you for joining in my study here in the White Mountains. And I'd like to give you a little talk on the Telco 2.0 Best Practices Live on trust frameworks and how you can share and protect and monetize personal information. I'd like to begin with a discussion of drivers of global identity ecosystems. So what is happening now to make this so important? Why are we concerned with trust systems now and identity and privacy? And out of that, we're going to look at new kinds of business models and how the value propositions, basically value webs, not so much value chains, are coming out of this new data ecosystem. And then we're going to look at trust frameworks themselves as a concept and a way of dealing with issues around security and privacy and the sharing of personal information. And from that, then we're going to look at a demo that we've developed in conjunction with the Media Lab at MIT, the Human Dynamics Group, on an experiment that they're doing called Friends and Family on mobile data platforms, in which we're going to look at things like a digital wallet and cards, and how you accept offers and trust frameworks, and how do you register what we call big data apps. And then we're going to end with what we think are new opportunities for telcos. So what are the drivers of disruption? Why is this becoming such a big thing now? Well, I think one of the principal things that happened in the last 5 or 6 years is that we recognize the importance of authenticated identity. The internet was not designed with much concern about identity and authentication. That combined with the billions of data that's being produced through mobile phones and sensors, that suddenly there's this wealth of information that's being produced that has enormous value, but it had problems around how to protect it and share it, because we have privacy laws and a whole set of conventions that are very concerned about the inappropriate disclosure of this information on the one hand. On the other hand, this has great economic value. And especially we're learning something new about what we call native data. It's sort of data that's created within the ecosystem for the ecosystem. It's not so much data about things in the physical world, but they're really inputs and outputs of new kinds of services that are inherently born digital. And this creates new kind of value networks. This creates new kind of opportunities, creating new kinds of services that leverage big data, data that was never there before. And we can build institutional frameworks like trust frameworks that make use of this data in unique ways. And out of this comes the notion of the digital self, the quantified self. Who am I? And with all this data about myself, financial data, you have healthcare data, you have your friends and networks, you have your purchasing behavior. If we pull this all together, and we've been looking at something and developing something called a personal data store, and I have control over that, what are the kinds of things that I can do that I can never have done before? And we see in this notion of user-centric identity, where people have control of their information about themselves, a new alignment of interests. The fact is that people have control over it, and they're working with different parties that are collecting it, and the ways then they can share it together to create new kind of values, to break down the silos of data. A lot of personal data is captive in different kind of databases. They don't even know what data they have on people, whether it's really correct or valid, who else has data about. There's no incentive to pull it together, to share it, to create value from it. And so there are ways in which user-centric identity model, and this is Project Higgins, is something that we've been working on the last 6 or 7 years at the Law Lab, but lots of people have been working on it over the last decade, is how do you break down the silos? How do you give people control of information and reduce the friction of sharing and creating value from it? From this becomes a new kind of regulatory framework that recognizes this changing environment and grows and adapts with this environment to make it possible to share information in a principled way. From this comes a new kind of business model, we believe. And it will not be a remake or reinvention of the cable television model. Nor do we think it will necessarily be an advertising or behavioral targeting driven. Though really the internet is subsidized by advertising, there may be other economic models, we believe, that will be more effective, more remunerative, as I can say that, and not dependent upon cookies, which is an old technology, nor pit vendors against consumers. There's no reason that you have to sort of trick and trap people to release information. Why not have a mutual incentive to create value out of it, to create trusted information that works to everyone's advantage. We see a symmetry between a user and a producer. And by that, we mean that a producer can become a user can become a producer. Little people can get together to aggregate to become formidable market forces. Anyone can be an aggregator of information and create markets and sell it and create new kinds of services. So it doesn't necessarily take big entrenched interests to do that. It's what we call peer-to-peer capitalism, where you have open mashups and open exchanges, new kinds of markets. But what's going to be key to that is trust. Trust will become a design parameter. Trust will become a key component to making any kind of exchange of information, any kind of stewardship of information reliable and trustworthy, as it were. Hence, social networks and exchanges, trust is going to be a key element. Now, we see trust, digital trust, is not something that's just freely given, but it's something that's earned and enforced. But when appropriately done, it really reduces transaction costs. It reduces litigation and enforcement costs, and as well as social and economic risks, as we've seen in the collapse of the financial system recently. So if you have appropriate kind of trust and design institutions to provide it, it not only reduces these problems, but increases the willingness of people to share and improve their data, creates liquidity and efficiency in markets, and actually makes social fairness something that's computable and something that people can come together around and understand in a collective and informed way. Now, let's talk about an application that we're developing with MIT. It's called Friends and Family, the MIT application. It's a great application that exists on a mobile phone. And what it does is it tracks everything you do on a mobile phone. And that includes your text messaging, accelerometer, how much you access certain media, SMS, your GPS locations. It's everything you do. So it monitors that and takes that information and uploads it to a data mining service that analyzes it and then sends that information back to you and tells you something about what you're doing. And already this research has shown that it has high predictive value in terms of purchasing behavior, around healthcare, around affinity networks and friends. There seems to be endless things that you can do with this, and in comparing yourself to other people, what kind of networks you want to be part of. It's very, very powerful data. The problem with it is that it's very spooky. It's surveillance. It's Orwellian. People are not very comfortable with a device capturing all this information and people data mining it in an unprincipled way. So how can we create certain ways of trust frameworks that make it possible to protect and share this information in a way that create the value but not create the risks? So what I'd like to share with you is our trust framework application. And we're building on Project Higgins, which is an open source project that the Berkman Center has been involved with quite some time. But a number of parties have been active in this whole area. And what we're seeing here is a gold card, and there's a little red light, like an oil light going on. The cards represent different levels of sharing of information. Now, the reason the red light is going on is that the system detected some kind of breach. It's like your oil light going on in your car. So maybe we shouldn't use the gold card, which is the highest form of sharing, but we should go to the silver card. And I want to confirm that I will change my card sharing access protocol from gold to silver. No yellow, red light goes on this time. And so I want to take this and I want to make this card available for research, and I want to put it in a trove, a little box. And it says your card has been placed into the trove. It can now be accessed by registered applications in the trust framework under the terms of the silver card. And lo and behold, we're going to get an offer that's going to come to us, and it's going to be a new offer, and that's going to be from our experimental work, our collaboration work with MIT on the Friends and Family application. But I want to see something about the trust framework. And this is the application that we're developing. And this trust framework it has a name. It's a Friends and Family Trust Framework, and we are the acting trustees, us being Harvard Law Lab and MIT Media Lab. And there's an overall rating that the system that's given to it. We have a 5-star rating system. We've arbitrarily given ourselves, not surprisingly, 4 stars. And we like to think it'd be interoperable in the US, in the EU, and the UK. And what you find before you is a dial that represents a measure of risk. So the dial in the green means find this low level of risk. But the point being of the star system is that you could have regulators or some independent entity rate these as to their level of risk and give it a star rating. And this could be based on objective measures. For example, there's these 3 dials below, level of protection, that correspond to notions of information privacy and fair information practices that we see. So it's really what are the harms and duties protecting information from an individual, and making sure that it's used in the appropriate way, that it doesn't leak out of the system. There's another dial called level of assurance. In the U.S., there's something called NIST standards. There are 4 levels of assurance for authenticating people into websites or into access to services, and the highest level requires 2 biometrics. Again, there are objective ways of assigning stars and getting aggregate scores for trust frameworks. Likewise, there's level of control, and that represents harms and duties around the control, the flow of information. Some of these ideas are being developed by the Open Identity Exchange, in which we are collaborating with a number of attorneys to develop a series of tests and processes by which we can identify ways of establishing, ways of writing contracts and service agreements around different levels of service, a level of control, and level of assurance. What I'd like to do now is turn to, not from to the perspective of the user, but say an app developer, because it's very important that you be able to register app developers into a trust framework. So the first thing they have to do is authenticate themselves, so you really have to know who you're dealing with. In this case, we'd like to may have an app developer who is a bicycle fanatic. There's someone who rides all the time, travels around the world, has a group of friends that ride very intensively, have high-end bikes, and that person wants to be able to create a member network by which they can get friends together to coordinate their behavior, so there's location information, but also maybe to buy high-end bikes or certain kinds of bike equipment at a discount. So the first thing to do is register. They would sign an agreement as being a member of a trust framework. It would be very binding. They have a description of the app, and then they have a selection of templates that represent the kind of information that they want to discover. So in this case, it would be declared interest. If someone says that they're really interested in bicycle racing, that would be a declared interest. If they purchase a lot of bicycle material, they do a lot of travel, that would be something that would be discoverable, what their affiliations with, and even on their mobile network, their mobile phone, who they interact with, what kind. There may be certain patterns there that indicate that there's an affinity between people who are high-end bicycle riders. So once you do that, you complete your application, you get your card, and then you're able to discover, walk, crawl, many different kinds of personal data stores, maybe other data sources, discover who's there, create a member network, and then be able to buy bicycle equipment or scheduled vacations at a significant discount. Now, all of this is protected in this particular application by 6 layers of trust. At the very bottom, we have hashed anonymized user ID. With every mobile phone, there's a unique identifier, device identifier. We hash this, so this is not easily discoverable. At another level, we have the OAuth tokens for access control to data. And this is an encryption in a way of creating a token, so it's again not easily identifiable, but you can't get to the original person for personal identifying information. And you have people's ability to go to different sites without having to log in again. It's a third-party federation capability, and it has controls on access to resources and expiration dates. So there's a way in which you can prevent certain times of linking and coordination of identity of information to re-identify people. The next level, there's personal data store, protected by OAuth, data encryption, data portability. And on top of that, we have the privacy technologies, anonymized aggregation, and things like zero-knowledge proof. We used anonymized aggregation in this particular application with the MIT Friends and Family application. On top of that, we just showed you earlier that you have access control levels as expressed in cards. And on top of that, we have the trust framework itself, which is really a collection of governance mechanisms and policies and laws. And there again, there's an opportunity to do some kinds of innovation. So we have levels of assurance, levels of protection, level of control. You can audit procedures, you can dispute resolution, you can have various remedies, enforcement techniques. Again, this is an area for innovation within trust framework. So what we see is a new ecosystem coming out of this, in which there will be innovations in governance. There may be new kinds of benchmarks that are being set, different kind of standards of performance being set by regulators across jurisdictions. So you could have the concept of 5 stars, but you could have very precise metrics and in terms of how to award stars to different kinds of trust systems for different kinds of data. You have an open architecture to encourage transparency and innovation. We believe you're going to have things like virtual wallets and cards because it builds on habit structures that people already have, and it's easy to scale. You have different trust networks for different sectors. So you're probably going to have different trust networks for medical information versus financial information versus other types of personal and social information. A key element is really thinking about flow and big data. Recognizing that there's only going to be exponential growth in data, it's important for this data to flow, but then again, in a principled way. And you're going to have similar principles of financial services system. You have to recognize the fact that personal data is like a new asset class. And then how do you protect that asset class? And some of the things that we've learned, the good things we've learned from financial regulation, now perhaps hopefully not the bad things, we can apply to new kinds of designs for trust frameworks. Going forward, we think that data mining is the next search. When you think about all the data we're going to have on people and the fact that people can expose data and use that data to better improve their lives and better sync up with people and discover things they never knew existed, not just in purchasing, but doing a whole variety of services in health particularly, where people can expose without revealing themselves. And this is very important, that they may have a certain propensity for disease or exposure, and they're be exposed to remedies. They can find people who have health networks. There are all sorts of things in which this ability to do data mining can create a whole new kinds of service that we never thought of. So what I'd like to end with, particularly from the telco point of view, is don't fear the big data. Wrap it in trust. Recognize this is a real big business opportunity. And it's something that is nascent at this point, and we're just beginning to do our work, and we're looking forward to getting feedback from people on these ideas. So thank you very much, and if you're interested in contacting us, here's my contact information, and we welcome any feedback. Thank you.